Right. So this is the general guidelines or procurement under IBRD, which is International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, loan and IDA credits, something like that. Right. So we'll be taking a look at that, understand this, so that you can really get a lot of insights about how to draft a contract document as well as the invitation for bidding or something like that. Right. So content, some of the contents or the purpose of this document and general considerations and applicability of guidelines, eligibility in advanced contracting and retroactive financing. This is the different types of procurement, or it's not the conventional procurement of once the loan gets sanctioned, you order for stuff, or once a fund gets initiated or funds gets approved or sanctioned, then only you go for procurement. This is procuring advance, like some portion of it like gets purchased advance, so that like once it does, when the loan gets released, you can reimburse or depending upon the bank's procedure, so you can claim for money, right? The money you spend for the advanced procurement or something. So that's what basically the advanced contracting and retroactive financing. Then joint ventures, like multiple companies or generally two or more companies join together to form a, uh, you know, um, bigger firm. The firm itself is kind of a very big, so the different big firms form together to form a bigger alliance, so that like they can take up a multifarious projects and multi-billion projects and something like that. And then like bank reviews and misprocurement and reference to bank, and very important here is fraud and corrupt practice. Even in fact in our invitation for bidding, fraudulent practices and corrupt practices is a separate class. So even IBRD have got the same class or something like that, right? And then procurement plan, that is all these things comes under introduction to this guideline. Then it's very important part two, which is the core part of this guidelines, which is called international competitive bidding, generally referred as ICB, right? So this is generally governed by different countries, like multinational companies will take up projects in different countries across the globe. So it is almost an international competitive bidding rather than national competitive bidding, right? So we don't represent Indian competitive bidding since ICB, this acronym cannot be used because ICB, which is referred to international competitive bidding. Right. And then let's take a look at the size and the types of contract. Then we talk about two-stage bidding. Sometimes for an extremely larger project, the start to end of the project may not be determined very efficiently. Say they get to fragment into pieces, so that like till middle stage, from the first stage, initial stage to middle stage, there will be one contractor, or the same contractor can be from middle stage to end stage also, but they fragment into different pieces. Example is the rocket launch, like the manufacturing of rocket or procurements of the materials for the rocket and something like that. And then people looks into the control system, people involved in the control systems and something like that, right? So those things can be considered to be a two-stage bidding, or generally there could be a multi-stage bidding as well, in which like multiple stages of bidding can happen, right? Something like that. So this is only for extremely large projects and something like that. Since it's an international competitive bidding, these multiple stage bidding can be a good option by somebody. One example is like procuring raw materials from local regions when compared to transferring from abroad or from other countries. So in that case, initial procurement of that can be given to the native or the local bidders or something like that. So that the next from next step onwards, like for the construction, they can get some specialized agencies. In that case, two-phase bidding will be a really then is pre-qualification of the bidders and all other things like notification and investments. All we have seen in detail during the invitation for bidding itself. And then the advertising, we've seen example of the newspaper ads, the e-tendering or e-procurement or something. So we can refer that those lectures regarding the advertisement. And very important, even they have themselves highlighted in bold as a bidding documents. So this is the key feature in the guidelines, when which what are the things that should be you know uh, considered in a bidding document is a very important thing. Right? So they talk about validity of bid and bid security. Language, we have seen that in invitation for bid as well, like generally or multilingual regions, people prefer a common language. Even invitation for bidding that we see in the example, they have written using English, right? So English becomes de facto standard for the communication, right? So English kind of preferred even in international competitive bidding. Then clarity of bidding documents and standards and use of brand names or something. uh, so the native name, like brand names, for example, there is a compound called air entering agent, so which creates bubbles or it creates a voids or it's a kind of a soapy solution which makes the concrete more workable. Generally, it is used in self-compacting concrete so that the concrete can flow with much easier, right? But generally, people refer that to micro air. Like micro air is a brand name of some chemical company. I think it's BASF Chemicals. So people generally prefer micro air. So they were fond of the name, so they started using micro air instead of they referring that to air entering it. And then another formwork company which manufacture modular aluminum formwork. The company is Maiwan Forest, MFE, or generally they call us Maiwan. But now they only refer those kind of formworks Maiwan formwork only. Even if you take any real estate, people talk about Maiwan formwork. They don't actually represent the type of formwork, but it's a company that manufactures that. So that's a brand name. So misrepresentation of a brand name. Say for example, there's another company called Ulma, also manufactures aluminum formwork, or Kumkam King, a Korean-based company. They also manufacture aluminum. But even then, people when they see, they say Maiwan. So that's a brand name. Use of brand name should be specifically mentioned, right? Somewhere. And then price adjustment. So for example, if there's a hike in the pricing quoted earlier, say this international competitive bidding can take much longer time because it has got a lot of things to do. Say for example, many countries apply for this, and the scrutiny takes much longer. So during that particular period of time, so the price adjustment will be fast. So generally they call it escalation, price escalation, when which they add that to price. Generally, the construction materials subject to price escalation. So generally, nominally they go for 7. They presume like, what happens if the contractor price would actually escalate, or he might provide lesser specification than the required, and then finally the resulting building will be a faulty building or less quality stuff. Then currency provision. Generally, people can choose different currencies also. They say maximum of 3 currencies. Like for example, native currency. Say if an Indian company quotes for an international project, they can quote in Indian rupee with reference to United States dollar or euro, predominantly or something. These 3 currencies can be given for the evaluation. So that like if the people from Great Britain, they can easily understand the euro, or people can understand dollars, and so equivalent currencies can be easily understood. Even many countries other than like European Union, they understand uh, dollar price very much. So dollar can be a primal currency or something like that. And so that's what we talk about currency. And currency converts also. Like one interesting factor, like when I bought my first book in Amazon.com during 2006, it is just like 55 rupees a dollar, right? So now it is more expensive. Like if you want to buy now, you have to pay a little extras. So there's a currency conversion matters. Same way, if you quote now and the project happens really after 3 years, then you should really look into the inflation and the currencies at that moment, right? So you should not say that you have quoted early little and then now you're asking for more. So in that case, all those things, price adjustment or something. And then currency of payment is also matters. Like for example, a project gets done in even though in Germany, if you request for payment of that in Indian currency, so if the or like the owner request for if he's agree to pay directly, so that is also an option or something. Or you can get it in currency and you can get converted via bank. Then all this terms of payments and alternative bidding and conditions of contract. This is a very important thing called conditions of contract. Even in invitation for bid, we talked about some special conditions of contract and performance security, and we also talked about liquidated damages and so on, right? And we also talked about force majeure in a different sense. We call that as an act of God or unexpected event. Force majeure is a French term which means that something happens beyond our expectations. Say, for example, during a construction, there could be a tsunami, or there could be hurricane that impart the building or the construction or the one which we have done so far. So those are comes under force majeure, right? So in that case, the contractor cannot be sued. It's a natural thing. He cannot able to control the natural parameters, right? So that case is something. But luckily, bigger construction companies in Chennai, there was a huge storm called Barda storm. When during that period itself, some of the major construction companies who employ good quality form box systems and all were very intact when compared to the conventional local made, site made form box systems. So, which means that quality gets assured when you get proprietary or engineered products. Something. So in that case, like we anticipate, December could be a month of catastrophe or possibility of catastrophe. So if you provide a poor quality stuff, then it's the mistake of the contractor. But then like it's just a force measure, like you can't predict. Or sometimes it can happen, and sometimes it doesn't happen. So it's called force measure. And we talk about the applicable loss and settlement of disputes. Generally, conciliation will be the first. They mutually discuss and settle the matter. If it goes beyond, then they go for arbitration, and then arbitration happens in mutually agreed place could be or something. Then C, part number C is also pretty much important, like bid opening, evaluation, award of contract. In fact, we talked about all those things in pretty detail. Then here we talk about other methods of procurement also. We talk about the United Nations agencies procurement, right? And then procurement agents or inspection agents appointed by different international bodies, and procurement in loan to financial intermediaries, like something like we assure guarantee to some portion, and then we acquire loan, and then we start looking into the construction of it or something like that. And it is also talk about limited international bidding, like this is kind of a selective contracting or selective tendering, when which it does not invite all countries. Instead, it only invites superpower nation or something like that, who has the capacity to do or something. Say, for example, construction of bridges. We can have invitation from many countries, but if you want to have a specific construction of specific type of bridge, say the cable stayed long span cable stayed bridges, then the countries which are pioneer in constructing that, say Japan, China, USA, you can get bidding from them, like instead of having it from all other companies, all other countries, they can get representation, they can get it done from the companies who have, the countries who have got specialization in that, right? Something like that. So that's what basically limited international and national competitive bidding is within the country. That is what we have seen during our example. Like we talk about an Corporation of Chennai example, no invitation for bid, and other things like the schedule of procurement reviews, prior reviews and post reviews, and domestic preferences. This is kind of a pretty much it is not biased, but as I told you, when you want to buy a material which is available locally, And another case is like you wanted to import from abroad. So we naturally prefer to use the materials available local, right? So provided it has the same specification and same usage or something like that. So that's what basically means the domestic preference or preference given to the local regions or something. Right. So we also talk about the other related steps like the guidance to bidders and something like that. Very important here is confidentiality, right? So it is not only the bidding guy, but also the person who evaluates that bid or something like that. So very important thing. In tomorrow's lecture, we'll be looking into the public-private partnership, which is called PPP, and then the terms that we will discuss is given here, like BOO, which is called Build, Own, and Operate. So which means that um, it's a public-private partnership, which means the government and a private sector join together to construct a particular project. Say, for example, toll booths. So the highway gets constructed by the private sector. Say a bigger company like L&T does that, and then they own it for a certain period of time, say 5 years period of time, and then they operate. They get the revenue based on collecting the toll, right? And then once that is done, they will transfer to the government. So the first one is build, own, and operate, right? The next is build, own, operate, and transfer. So finally, at the end of 5 years, even if they were profitable or lost, they have to give it to the government back. So it's a public role. So they can own only certain period of time. The next is build, operate, and transfer. Like they don't own it, they operate it, and then they transfer. So it's pretty much the same as BOOT. In that case, the ownership is not with the private sector for even for a certain period of time. It gets given or it is withhold it's held by the government sector itself, right? Somewhere. The next is CIF, which is cost, insurance, and freight, which is like the total cost of the package you send and also the insurance associated with that, and then the freight, which is the transfer or transport cost in some way, transport details and something like that. That's what we call CIF. And there's something called CIP also, which is carriage and insurance paid, which is the insurance paid during the transfer of that particular packages. Say for example, cotton gets generally transferred in trucks in the form of bale. Bale is the unit of measurement of cotton, right? So 100 kg, I guess, of bale. So they generally carriage, they value the carriage, and then the insurance paid. Cotton is highly, it could be inflammable, right? So when there is at least a small bit of heat or the fire, it can become a catastrophe. So they insure generally for cotton or all inflammable, even petrol and all the gasoline inflammable. So they look into carriage and insurance, and then the carriage paid to the destination. Like it is something like the postal. Like if you don't provide the proper postage stamp, the postal department will collect the stamp due from the destination rather than the uh, person who sends that, right? So something like that. And DTP is delivery duty paid, and then EX is X work, and then FC is free carriage. And you also know GDP, GNP, gross national product. And this is what we are looking here, this IBRD, which is International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. And ICB is always international competitive bidding. Generally, people misuse this Indian competitive bidding, but all other country specific competitive bidding or national competitive bidding. Even an Indian construction company, I mean Indian construction project, gets outsourced to other countries, company. Then it is international competitive bidding. It's not an Indian competitive bidding or something. Then IDA is International Development Agency, which is the one which sanctions the loan or something like that. And then LIB is a limited international bidding, and NCB is national competitive bidding. NGO is non-governmental organization, and PAD is project appraisal document, and SA is special accounts, SBD is standard bidding documents. You can see it's S, it's documents. And UN is United Nations, and UNB is United Nations Development Business Summit. So these are some of the things that you should know before we get into the guidelines. Right? So let me quickly run through these because it's quite a big document. So first, in the case they talk about the guidelines. This is a guideline for crediting or granting loans from the International Development Association to the procurement of goods, works, and service by the agencies or the government, even government or private agencies. And then they talk about the agreement, the article of agreement. So what they say here, this is very important. I think it's yeah. So they grant loan for the purpose in which it was taken for economy improvement or efficiency without regards to the political, or it's just like they say non-biased sanctioning. So they sanction our, in the invitation for bid example, they sanction loan for constructing the roads in our Chennai region, Sameta. So those things are pretty much a very important document. So that's non-biased. They not only sanction to developed nation but also developing nations and so on, depending upon the requirements. And then this is very important. Generally, for effective public procurement, open competition is there. So they cannot select, or they cannot go for selective tendering or selective bidding, so that like there could be some bias or something. So generally, it's an open competition. There should be for effective public procurement, it's open competitive. And then in most cases, the international competitive bidding, it is administered by the domestic manufactured goods. Like they generally prefer taking bidders from the particular location or nearest to that location, so that they don't have to really take a risk of freight change or freight damages or something like that. Right? And applicability of guidelines, like it is satisfactory quality and are compatible with the balance of the project, or it will be delivered or completed in timely fashion. So these things, right? So they'll check all these things before the guidelines or the loan gets sanctioned. And eligibility is all countries legally active and the companies are legally registered or something. Then this is what I've talked about: advanced contracting and retroactive financing. This is, they say, the borrower may wish to proceed with the initial step of procurement even before the loans get sanctioned. So that like once the loan gets sanctioned, they will be reimbursed generally, or it is just a huge risk. It's the borrower's own risk that they have to concurrence by the bank procedure documentation afterwards, and generally it is avoided, but then like in case of emergency procurement or something they can. And joint ventures, any firm may bid independently or in joint venture, just forming an alliance with the suitable compatible companies. And bank does do the borrower's procurement procedures, documents, bid evaluation, and then only they will sanction. Misprocurement is do not financially for goods and work which have not been procured in accordance with agreed provision in the law. Say, for example, if there is a provision to buy a certain equipment or something through some agency, I mean, approved agency, if they bought it by other means, which is not stated in the document, then it is called misprocurement. And the contractor or the person has to do. Or sometimes they might find something pretty much good, like the sensors we talk about. Like now the sensors gets developed very great sense. Uh, they might put the low quality sensor, and then now they found out like a company that gives good sensor for the same value. Like in that case, they can go for against the document, but then they have to produce a no objection certificate from the bank. Right? So and then only they can you know uh, procure, and then otherwise it is called as a misprocurement or something. This is all legal documents that we talk about the reference bank, the borrower, and the as known as applied for the loan and IBRD, and you can see equivalent to USD and the names and something like that. And here is very important. Kindly pay attention here. It talks about the fraudulent and corrupt practices. Like there are different things that you should know. Fraud and corruption are a little different, but corruption is a type of fraud. And let's take a look at the differences. Like the corrupt practices is here, they are represented here. The corrupt practice, which is offering or giving some ransom money for bypassing the or to gain some benefit or something is called corrupt. Whereas fraudulent practices like act of misrepresenting data or knowingly or even unknowingly, they might mislead something but to hide something to get some advantage. So that's also fraudulent practice, but that does not come in a corrupt practices. And then like there is another thing is called collusive practice, right? So it is between two or more parties to achieve an improper purpose, including to influence improperly the action of another party. This is what we talked about the cartels. Like a bigger company, they generally have multiple companies subordinates. So the subordinates will quote for higher price, so that the competitor, the person, the company, the prime company can quote less than the higher, not as low as possible. But then in the overall perspective, the low bid will wins. So it's kind of an cartel or collusive practice. So it should not happen. So it should not be any bias in the bidding. And then coercive practice is just like threatening the other company or something like a proximity of threatening the other companies to withdraw, or even if they get it, like make them not to work, make them to halt their work or something. That's called coercive practice. And obstructive practice is harming, physically destroying, falsifying the or providing some fake documents to state the or allege a company for fraudulent or corrupt practices or something like that, right? Those comes under obstructive practices, not able to not making the not allowing the work to start or something, hampering the work progress or something. And all the other things that we have done in initial stage, there should be a procurement plan which has got a good documentations of what to be done, and when it is done, and what type of contract, and what is the review process of the bank. And you can see that like at least 18 months should be given during the initial period for the evaluation. So it's almost in years time. That's why they say uh, retroactive procurement. So this takes longer time even for everything, but it's worth the time because they have to evaluate to a greater detail. And then international competitive bidding is some of these things that we have seen in the invitation to bid itself. Like let me run through that. Here we talk about two-stage bidding. Like if it is extremely large complex projects, they cannot have, you know you can see that it is very difficult to or it is undesirable and impractical to prepare complete technical specification in advance for the entire project. So it can fragment into two stages or three stages depending upon the requirement. And notification and advertisement, like in national competitive bidding, I remember we have seen something like newspaper advertisements, so on. Whereas in international competitive bidding, we can go with the UN Development Business Online, UNDP, and Development Gateways digital market and something like that. So some examples are available. And then pre-qualification of bidders, we talk about this enough detail in invitation to bid, when which the bidder will be evaluated based on his credential. Here it is based on his experience, past performance on similar contract, capability with respect to personal equipment, construction or manufacturing facilities, which means this ability, it does not depend on the other person, and financial question. So their turnovers and something like that, right? So that's a very important thing they evaluate. And bid documents is all the general documents. Bid security, the amount to give during the submission of bid for as a surety. Language is English, and clarity of bidding document. So evaluator can ask for any unclear stuff uh, to get clarification from the bidder, and all prospective bidders shall be provided the same information, right? So this is also very important. It is not like the person who asked for a given. It's not that. All the information should be available to all the bidders. Then only they have a clear, unbiased bid or something. Standards and use of brand names and pricing. Here, price adjustment is an important factor. Like sometimes the bid price will be fixed or can be adjusted based on any changes. Generally, it will be upward, which is increased cost, or downward cost also. Say, for example, due to advancement in technology, the price of the particular technology may come down, right? So in that case, they can go for the lowest prices. But generally, it is adjusted for the highest price only. Then transportation in insurance, like the goods and currency provisions, I can even there isn't any fixed currency. They can quote it in currency of their native place, and also with the international currency like the USD or Euro or something like that. And you can see that express bids as the I think it's no more than three foreign currencies. As I told you, it cannot have more than three foreign. They cannot have 10 currencies or something like that. And currency conversion is also a very important factor. There is one thing that we will discuss in next class about the currency conversion. Then currency of payment and mode of payment and something like that. Alternative bids. Like in case they can't submit it like in the procedure explained, they can also request for some other means of submission. And conditions of contract, which is very important. Like some of the things like performance security and the time you liquidate a damage. What happens if the contractor becomes insolvent or something like that, or when the contract get delayed in delivery of goods or completion or failure of goods or something like that. So that damages should be paid to the owner by the person who gets the contract on all other bonus classes also. Force majeure is what we have seen, like it's an act of God. So in that case, there should be, a provision to act upon. And then the contract should clearly state that what happens to the force measure and something like that. And then like they talk about applicable laws and settlement of disputes. This is which law governs, or it's a law or a mutual place where they can appeal or something like that. It talks about that. And other things like this. See, we talked about bid opening and all in detail in invitations to bid, the different procedures, responsiveness, and we talked about confidentiality. And here, this is very important for international competitive bidding. Even though it's an international competitive bidding, for something which the domestic preferences or given, so they will have to define which case they can give domestic preferences or something. So it's not kind of a biasing, but it just improving the workflow rather than like waiting for the materials from the abroad to reach in or something. It also, for example, getting a local construction workers will be really beneficial, because getting from hiring from other countries, the language will be an issue during the construction, or the local people they can accommodate to the situation or something like that. And then we talk about validity of bid and pre-qualifications of bidders and so on. Award of contract. So this is a very important thing. Like once everything is done, and what are the procedures to award the contract? The one key factor we always say is that responsiveness. So substantial responsive bidder only will be given the contract, even though his bid documents is supposed to be supreme and he got the contract, or his gets the contract. Or his contract, I know his bid is supposed to be the best or something like that. By then publications of award of contract. So once a person gets the contract, it gets notified in UNDB online, so that the other persons who bid for the same can know that, or it's generally announced publicly, so that like once he will be responsible, or the company will be responsible for the the project or something like that. And rejection of bids, as I told you, the IBRD has the rights to reject any bidder if it is found even after award of contract also, if he found to be not suitable or something like that. And modified thing, like it can be modified based on the some differential thing, like for example large value contracts, they can have a financial program for sanctioning and also releasing the fund or something like that. And I think that's it. These are some of the other methods of procurement, like as I told you, limited international competitive bidding, which is just like not having as comprehensive as international competitive bidding, but they shall seek bid from a list of potential, broad suppliers or the companies where they have done their job pretty good or something. Even domestic preference is not preferred here because they want to look into specialized people. And national competitive bidding is within the country. And shopping is also a procurement method. This shopping does not means regular shopping. It is just like price quoted, and then on that point of time, there's several suppliers get into, and then they'll evaluate the best, or minimum of three bidders or the suppliers will be selected. And it's always an inappropriate method. It is also an off-the-shelf goods or standard specification commodity, right? Something like that. Direct contracting, it is during emergency, they can't wait for recruitment and evaluation, then they can go for direct contracting. And force account, it's just like use of borrower's own personal equipment for doing the task, and then it gets remunerated later. And other things like procurements, like United Nations inspection agents, and then we talk about BOT and BOO in private sector. I mean, public-private sector in tomorrow's class. And performance-based procurement also, like we talk about output-based procurement, when which like initially we procure from a particular company or industry. So if they met the good standard, then we continue to procure, or we'll shut down and then we'll go back to the other company which can produce the same or similar product, something like that. This will make the company hold, so that they always look into supplying of the good quality. So otherwise their contract gets elapsed. So that like it's a type of contract, no? So it gets elapsed. That's why people maintain safety standards or quality standards to meet these specifications. And I think that's it. Other things are like the appendices, like